What's the American Adventure like? Awesome.
The American Adventure at Ilkeston, Derbyshire, just off Junction 26 of the M1.
When you ask people to think of UK theme parks, the current big names come up. Alton Towers, Thorpe Park, maybe even Drayton Manor. But if you go back years, one other name may have had the potential to become one of these big names. Yet this park ended up closed and abandoned. This was the American Adventure. Before we look at the American Adventure, we have to go further back in time to look at how it began. Back in the 1970s, a plot of land in Derbyshire was earmarked for a private leisure development. In 1979, an agreement was formed to create an exhibition based around the best of all things British. As the UK does when plans are drawn up to create a large leisure area, residents in the area began to oppose the development due to the traffic and noise concerns. Derbyshire County Council granted Kent-based KLF Group a 100-year lease on the land. During this time, a lot of political issues happened between the two and a prolonged court battle ensued. The courts found the original agreement invalid, which eventually led to claiming over £11 million from the Derbyshire County Council. With the 100-year lease intact and with an extra £4 million from commercial investors, the funds were in place to finance their park, and they began construction on the Britannia Park. Estimated to be worth £18 million, Britannia Park was to feature a grand entrance with shops and cafes, a traditional village green where you could observe a blacksmith at work, Craft Village would showcase a fine array of British crafts, and the highlight, a British Ingenious exhibit, would feature 8 pavilions that commercial investors could use to highlight the importance of their products in everyday British life. A miniature section would also show UK landmarks at a 1/25th scale, and an arena was planned to be constructed in the future, as well as the location set to hold an annual air tattoo. The plans were huge for the time, but the reputation in the area was not positive. After upsetting most nearby residents, as well as taxpayers from the lawsuit, the final development had to wow to gain back from this bad reputation. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Britannia Park opened on June 27th, 1985, far from completion, marked with a flyover from the famous Concorde and a speech by heavyweight champion Henry Cooper. Only 5 of the pavilions were occupied, and half a mile of miniature railway line was about all the park had to offer on opening day. Most of the 1985 season was also a washout with heavy rain daily, which halted further construction efforts, as well as reduced visitor numbers. Britannia Park would only last 12 weeks before closing on September 9th, 1985. Eventually, Derby County Council would bail out KFL by buying back the lease for £2.5 million and sold the area to Granada. KLF founder Peter Keller was later imprisoned for fraud, and the chairman of Britannia Park also received a 6-month prison sentence. At this time, John Rigby of Park Hall Leisure, who Granada had a stake in, and who was also associated with Camelot theme park in Chorley, which was also owned by Granada, stepped in. He negotiated a new 100-year lease in August 1986 and had big plans for his next project. Far from the all things British theme, he believed there would be room for a fully fledged cowboys versus native theme park, and this was the first idea of the American Adventure. With a good infrastructure already in place, all that was needed was to cover over the remnants of the Britannia Park and apply his ideas. The plan was to split the park into 2 sections, the Native Americans on one side and the cowboys on the other. Looking at the park map from the first year, you can clearly see that this came to be. The park's entrance was covered in the stars and stripes and became a very bold, welcoming place. The British Geniuses Pavilion, which was now just an empty warehouse, was covered in the iconic fiberglass faces that people remember today from visiting the park, and a huge play area for under 8s was built inside, called Pioneers Playland. Moving over from here, guests would find a replica of the Alamo structure, and behind this a large arena, which would show stunt shows daily. Down by the lake, a Zamperla Buffalo-powered coaster was located, similar to the Buffalo at Drayton Manor, which opened in 1987. The park also featured a petting zoo with many different American animals and an adventure playground. The lakeside contained several shops and restaurants, a pirate ship, and a wagon-themed Ferris wheel. Deeper into the park, you reach Silver City, the cowboy section of the park, which was like walking directly through a western movie. A shootout happened twice a day, and the winner received a show from the girls next door at Lazy Lil's. At the end of the park was the gigantic fiberglass mountain which contained not one but two rides, a powered mine train coaster as well as the log flume. Running the length of the park was an adapted version of the miniature railway built for the Britannia Park. All of this was open for opening day on June 1987, a little different from the opening day for Britannia just 2 years before. At the time, the theming was incredible, and barely anything else existed to match it at this time. You have to remember that Alton Towers would not add its first fully themed ride until years later. American Adventure was known as Britain's major new theme park. The following year, investments continued, with the addition of the new Fort St. Lawrence area and a single ride, the Great Niagara Falls Rapids. With huge 12-seater queue-eating boat, the Rapids ride is considered to be one of the best of its kind to exist within the UK, and it's not surprising to see why. The impressive park only had competition from its sister park Camelot and the newly converted Chessington Zoo. The immersive, unique theming of the park was about to change after John Wrigley's departure. The opening 2 seasons were not a huge success financially for John Rigby and Granada. A bad reputation still remained from the poor Britannia Park, even though the advertisement efforts were in place to counter this. The 1989 season was hopeful to increase guest numbers due to one reason: the addition of a new signature ride. In fact, this was my personal first inverted roller coaster I ever rode. The ride would be named the Missile, a second-hand Vekoma boomerang from the Glasgow Garden Festival of 1988. The ride was added to the end of the park in a new area themed as a spaceport. At the time, the ride was voted the most intense ride in the UK, even though a clone copy existed 4 years earlier at West Midlands Safari Park from 1985 to 1991. Also new for 1989 was a dark waltzer attraction named G-Force that also sat in Spaceport. This year, the miniature railway also now did a complete circuit of the park, making it useful for transportation. 1991 was the park's most popular season. A Vekoma Canyon trip ride was added in the Alamo section, but not much else was added during the early 90s. In 1993, the Cowboys vs Natives theme was officially dropped, with the park being repainted all over in red, white and blue. One change though during 1993 would make a huge impact and give them the ride most people would remember the park for. At the time of its construction in 1987, Cherokee Falls was the tallest flume ride in the UK, a title taken by Thorpe Park's Loggers Leap in 1989. American Adventure set out to regain this title by adding a third drop that would make Loggers Leap 50-foot drop look small. A 60-foot drop was added with a rotating tunnel up the lift hill, and was now to be known as Nightmare Niagara. To avoid confusion, the Great Niagara Rapids were renamed to the Grand Canyon Rapids, and eventually renamed the Rocky Mountain Rapids. Nightmare Niagara will become the highlight of the park. The following year was not great for American Adventure. With competition starting to heat up, Blackpool Pleasure Beach added the big one, Drayton Manor added Shockwave, and Alton Towers' first heavily themed icon, Nemesis, would open. To try and compete, American Adventure opened the Motion Master Theatre in the Mount Rushmore area, a 4D minus the 3D experience where you would be strapped into a seat which would move with the movie on screen. The first movie shown featured RoboCop, and replaced the popular Pioneer Playland. Also added was a go-kart track that replaced the horseback stunt show in the Alamo. The Cowboy Shootout at the time merged into the horse show to become the Cowboy Stunt Show in Silver City. These additions did not do much to compete with the other UK theme parks though. Still looking to compete, the American Adventure decided to add a new roller coaster. At the time, Lightwater Valley were in administration and looking to sell their double looping Super Looper back to its manufacturer. The ride was placed in the area previously housing Canyon Trip, which had moved to Camelot. The ride would be themed after the popular Granada show Gladiators, and called Iron Wolf. The Alamo section of the park would become the Gladiators Arena. The ride was opened by Gladiator Wolf on April 1995, who actually had opened Nemesis the year before at Alton Towers. 1995 also saw another Granada brand, Sooty, replace the Wild West show, and Aliens replaced the RoboCop movie in the Motion Master Theatre. Eventually this would change to an Indiana Jones movie, and again change a couple of times after that. 1997 marked a major change. Granada decided they didn't actually want to run a theme park, and sold the lease and asset of the park to Venture World, which was led by ex-Alton Towers founder John Broome. All of the Granada branding was removed, and an extra charge Sky Coaster was installed. As an 11-year-old kid visiting the park in 1997 though, you'd have no idea of the struggles the park was having, and I remember the park as my first real love of theme parks. 1998 saw the addition of the short-lived Flying Island from Vekoma on Snake Island, but also saw the closure of the Grand Entrance, originally constructed for the Britannia Park. John Broome believed the park entrance should be at the bottom of the park, meaning guests lost the view of the park unfolding in front of them as they entered. The new entrance looked nowhere near as good as the old one, and a new grand entrance was promised but never became reality. John also did not like the all-American theme, and planned to rename the park Adventure World, and immediately changed the park's name to American Adventure World in preparation for the changeover. Even the flags flying in the horseback show changed from all-American to a variety of countries. He also had ideas for an inverted B&M and a wooden coaster to be added to the park. He planned most of the original theme would be removed, with Silver City left to represent the USA and Fort St. Louis left to represent Canada. None of these again ever happened, and in 1998 a report outlined losses of $1.3 million on a turnover of £4.8 million. John Broome announced he was leaving in 1999. The THG Group, who also owned Pontins and Blackpool Tower, bought the park. In the year 2000, the park name was returned to the American Adventure and the Flying Island ride was removed. The next few years saw the decline of the park. The park added no new rides without an upcharge. JCB World was added in 2003, rumoured to be a cost of £750,000, and charged guests $4.95 to spend 5 minutes using a real JCB digger. Eventually, they did change this though to be a free attraction for guests. Twin Looper, the renamed Iron Wolf, was now the JCB Twin Looper, and less attention was being given to maintaining the old rides. The Missile's track colour changed to a murky brown, Niagara's tunnel had stopped rotating, most of the features were turned off on the Rocky Mountain Rapids, and everything in the park required a repaint. Things really did need to change drastically. The following year, a park map was released, but areas were completely missing. Spaceport, Fort St. Lawrence, and perhaps most importantly, Nightmare Niagara was missing. The park had decided to target a new family-friendly children audience and purchase 3 flat rides to be added to the park: a kids carousel, a rockin' tug, and a fire brigade ride. All cheap, pre-themed rides that could be found anywhere. The park was not popular this season is an understatement. June 2005 would see the end of Nightmare Niagara, and the title of the tallest log flume went back to Fort Park. And by this point, barely anybody even cared. In 2005, a fan of the park sent in a suggestion letter to try and suggest some ways to save the park. The park director at the time, Roger Lloyd, replied basically saying, "We know what we're doing, and that the industry was not as straightforward as you may think." The park was a shell of its former self, and the potential it could have become. The Missile would stand unused throughout 2005 before being sold to Pleasurewood Hills in 2006, where it was rebranded as Wipeout. Fort St. Lawrence and the Rocky Mountain Rapids did reopen for 2006, with many features working again, and the Zamperla mine train was added around the site formerly occupied by Nightmare Niagara's third drop, aiming for the new family image the park wanted. The following year, on January 4th, 2007, the American Adventure announced it would not be reopening for the 2007 season, as many park rides as possible were auctioned off. The Missile is still running today at Pleasurewood Hills. Buffalo Stampede went to Twin Lakes Theme Park. Mini Mine Rush, which opened for just one season, was relocated to Flamingo Land after being purchased secondhand from Gulliver's, Warrington. Twin Looper was moved to Poland, and multiple rides went to the Billing Aquadrome. Everything else that wasn't sold was left to rot. Buildings remained for years and slowly declined until eventually barely anything left existed. In 2012, it was announced the land was to be redeveloped into housing, offices, and leisure facilities. It is such a shame that the potential of this park never came to be. I remember the park fondly from my childhood, and the potential the park could have grown into would have been a leading force in the UK theme park industry. Multiple wrong choices were made by the leadership of the park to get to the sad state it ended up in. If John Broome's plans had come to be, would the park still exist today with an iconic B&M at its centre? Who knows? The downfall of the park seemed to be around the time Granada was incorporating its IPs into the resort, and had the right person taken over from Granada, we could still be looking at a major contender in the UK theme park industry today. Instead, we look at an empty land of what could have been. Thank you so much for watching the first in this new series of Expedition Extinct, where we look at closed and abandoned theme parks from around the world, what they were and what they became. We'll be taking a look at the sister park to American Adventure, Camelot, in an upcoming video and what happened to that. If you enjoyed this video, please do like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.